Israel has attempted to assassinate senior Hamas figures on foreign soils several times before this strike on Hamas's political office in Doha on Tuesday, succeeding on some occasions, and on other occasions the targeted individuals survived. These operations, often carried out by Mossad or special units, have spanned across the decades and reached cities across the Middle East and beyond, from Amman all the way to Dubai. Each attempt carried not only immediate tactical implications, but also significant diplomatic consequences, straining Israel's relations with the host countries and fueling further cycles of confrontation with Hamas and other Palestinian factions. Joining us to discuss this is Professor Sami Al-Arian, a Palestinian-American academic and someone who's very familiar with Palestinian political affairs. Professor Sami, thank you for joining us.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. The Palestinians all along have said to the whole world that we're not dealing with a normal regime. We are dealing with a genocidal regime, a regime that is bent not only on killing and maiming and displacing the Palestinians, even going all the way through a famine and starvation policy, but they are intent on also breaking all the normal relations, normal rules of engagement that the world has known, at least for the past century. What we've seen is a regime that is lashing out at all its neighbors. I've looked up for the past 100 years how many countries actually were attacking more than 5 countries at one time. And I couldn't find any, including at the time of World War II. I mean, at best, the Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany were probably fighting 4 countries at one time. Here we're having a regime that has struck at not only the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, but also Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Iran, Tunisia, and now Qatar. They are lashing everywhere. Their intent of becoming the hegemon in the region. There is no more any kind of logic that can actually tell us what's going on in terms of what the regime is trying to do. So for the Palestinians to figure this out, that means the Palestinians would have to really start asking what is the nature of the Zionist project. But the Palestinians know what the nature of the Zionist project is. It's from the start being a project to displace the Palestinians, to kill as many of the Palestinians and depopulate the region and take as much of their land as possible for now a century and a quarter. And what we're seeing today and what's unfolding today in Gaza is just the continuation of this policy. But now it's in plain sight. Everybody can see it. Israel did not have the same scrutiny, the same social media, the same cameras and video clips in 1948, what we're witnessing today for the past more than 700 days. But we know fully well those Palestinians who survived that onslaught that took place in 1948 can tell you the stories. The world did not believe the Palestinian stories, or at least try to suppress of these stories as much as possible. My parents, my grandparents, were among those who were displaced and who were pursued, and some of them died in the process, some of them did not make it. But today we can see how thousands upon thousands of Palestinians, tens of thousands in fact, have been killed, and hundreds of thousands been displaced. They have destroyed whole towns and cities and hospitals and mosques and markets and residences and universities and schools and every aspect of civilian life. That is not normal. That is not normal when we talk about defenseless people. And they can't hide behind October 7th because Hamas is not in the West Bank the same way it is in Gaza. And yet the same policies are being pursued in the West Bank, not today, not last month, not last year, but since 1967. Today, we have 800,000 so-called settlers, invaders, in the midst of the West Bank. They have 1,000 checkpoints, which are primarily to prevent the Palestinians from living normal lives. They have to be checked every few kilometers or sometimes every few meters. because they're not being treated as human beings. They are being treated basically as people in a big concentration camp. That big concentration camp was called Gaza. And what we witnessed on October 7th was a prison break. People were trying to say enough is enough. 16 years of siege is enough. 16 years of blockade is enough. All these kind of things that they have been under by being totally ignored by the whole world with no hope in sight was enough. And that's what the cry was on October the 7th. How did the world respond? With total letdown. They have allowed this genocide to take place now for 700 days without doing much to hold the Zionist regime accountable to these atrocities. And yesterday was just another attempt by Israel to decapitate not only Palestinian leaders, but even the negotiators, those who have been negotiating. What were they negotiating? They were negotiating an American proposal. American proposal given to them by the President of the United States. And he was telling them, I want a response to my proposal. They were in different places. Some of them were in Turkey, others in Egypt, others in different places. They said, you need to come right away to discuss the president's proposal. Where were they trying to attack them? In America's ally, where the biggest and largest American base in the Middle East, even outside the United States, is in. That's the Al Ubaid Air Force Base, over 10,000 Americans. Now you're going to tell me that somehow this largest Air Force base, which houses the biggest radars, that is basically monitoring the whole airspace of the whole region, did not know about the Israeli plans coming from Israel into the Jordanian airspace, the Saudi airspace, possibly the Iraqi airspace, possibly the Emirati airspace, but at least two Arab countries' airspaces, and coming and hit. They had to be refueled in the air, and that they came and struck at these buildings and went back without the Americans knowing about it. Of course, that's a farce. That's just a bad joke. The Americans were in it. The Americans were part of this attempt to not only end the negotiations process that they started, and that they were saying that here we have a negotiating proposal for you to consider, but they were trying actually to again use these tactics in order to in order to attack the Palestinian side, so that Israel would achieve what they call this illusion of having total and absolute victory, which they will never get. Why?
So this is what I want to ask you about. Sorry. So this is what I want to ask you about. Yep. So this is what I want to ask you about. What option does this leave the Palestinian side and Hamas themselves? Will they revisit negotiations, and what could that look like? And if it had been successful, of course the assassination attempt wasn't successful, who would have stepped in on the Palestinian side to replace Hamas in the negotiation or mediation efforts?
Well, let's review the history of the relationship between the Zionist regime and resistance movements. Since the beginning of the Palestinian resistance movements, we can go back 70, 80, 90 years. Whether it was the British during their mandate with their brutality, to even the first leaders such as Al-Qassam himself was killed by the British in 1935. You go through all the attempts by Israel to kill as many of the resistance leaders in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Every decade, you have dozens of Palestinian leaders. If you look specifically at Hamas, whether it was Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Abdul Aziz al-Rantisi, Salah al-Maqadma, Salah al-Shahada, Ibrahim al-Maqadma, Salah al-Shahada, Yahya Ayyash. I mean, they have dozens and dozens and dozens of people that they have killed over the years. So they, even during this time, they killed Ismail Haniya and Saleh al-Aruri and even Yahya Sinwar and others. So had they been successful, and thank God they were not, Hamas would have been able to bring other people. And of course, this is not about Hamas. This is not about the Palestinians. This is about the spirit of the Palestinians, that they will not give up, they will not surrender. So if the destiny of Palestinian leaders is to die while fighting and resisting and rejecting the Zionist regime to end something called the Palestinian cause, is to make them forget about their ancestors and forget about the land and forget about their rights, they will fail. It's just another attempt. So from that standpoint, nothing would have changed, except, of course, you would have to have a setback. You have to bring other leaders to take over the movement, which means that one of the goals of this failed attempt is to actually delay and not have any kind of a negotiated settlement to release what they consider as their biggest goal, which is to free the captives.
But is it just a setback and delay, or is it Israel tossing the negotiation or mediation efforts to the side completely? They bombed what many people are calling now the negotiation table itself, which is Qatar, which is a completely different sovereign country. What do the Palestinian side do going ahead to kind of maybe put an end to the current war of the genocide in Gaza? What options realistically does this leave the Palestinian side with immediately?
There are two questions here. First is the options. What options do the Palestinians have? And secondly, whether Israel was actually serious about any negotiating settlement. If you go back and study the history of these negotiations, at least since January, you will find that at every juncture, at every attempt, where even the Americans or even the Israelis themselves would bring forth some kind of a plan, some kind of a proposal in which the Palestinians would give concessions, but they will not cross red lines, which are that at the end there has to be an end to this war, that there has to be a total withdrawal from Gaza, that there has to be a delivery of aid, sufficient aid to the Palestinians, rehabilitation and exchange of prisoners. As long as we can keep these 5 principles in place, Palestinians were making all the concessions that they were given by the mediators, whether it was Qatar, Egypt, the United States, or even sometimes written by Israel. When that happens, what happens? Who actually backs down? Who actually violates all these attempts and all these agreements and rejections? It was always the Israeli side, which gives you one conclusion, and one conclusion only, is that the Israelis were never actually serious about any kind of negotiating settlement. Now they say it openly, that they have this total surrender, which is not happening. Well, they have been saying this from day one, and the resistance says it's not happening. They actually are in a war of attrition. They lose soldiers every week, and they lose ground every week, despite all the brutality and the genocidal policies that they have pursuing, as well as the starvation. Now, in terms of what would the options the resistance has, they don't have much options. I mean, the resistance have been given 2 options. One is that total surrender, that you give yourself up, you raise the white flag, you disarm, we kill you, and then we're going to stop and see what we can do in the future. Is that an option? Of course it's not an option. Would they ever consider that? Absolutely not. So the only option that they have is that until this mad man and his supporter in the White House realize that this is not going to lead to their total victory, to this annihilation of the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian people. Gaza will not surrender despite all the destruction that they have wreaked on Gaza. And then the whole world must say in one voice, enough is enough. We're not going to stand up to this to this kind of genocides and starvation, that we're not going to let it take place any time further, and therefore it must stop. The resistance will continue to resist until one or two things happen. Either they die in the cause, in which case their experts, their own military experts, say that they cannot bring it down for about 5 to 10 years. If that's what they're going to be doing is yet to fight for another 5 to 10 years, and the world is letting them kill Palestinians during this time, then obviously we are in a world that is as brutal and as evil as the Israelis are. And on the other hand, we are talking about a 2 years, almost 2 years, we're coming to 2 years anniversary now, where the Palestinians have been paying the heavy price because of the world's failure to actually hold this evil acts by the Israelis and hold them accountable. And we have to also mention that they could not have been able to do it except for the support of the United States, the White House, those who are trying to project themselves as peacemakers, or actually they are the the ones who are bringing this evil into the lives of the Palestinians and into the scenes of the world every single day.
Yes. And one last question. What do you think the role of the neighboring Arab countries, specifically the countries neighboring Qatar at the moment? Qatari soil was attacked, and the GCC and several other Arab countries, what do you think their role as part of these coalitions and the Arab League, what do you think their role should be?
Unfortunately, the neighboring regimes, the Arab regimes, the Gulf regimes, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, even North African nations, and everyone in between, they have been trying to pass the buck. They have been giving empty rhetoric, even those who are even beyond the Arab countries have been giving empty rhetoric with nothing to back it up. You want this genocide to stop, then you must have policies that will back up your rhetoric. No country has broken relations. We have, even before we commit to some kind of a military intervention, there are a lot of stuff that could be done. I know Turkey recently has said that they will stop all trade with Israel almost after 2 years. I don't know what they were waiting for during this time. But if you look at the cards that people have, there is so much pressure that can be brought not only on Israel but also in the United States, the biggest backer of Israel. You know, Trump was in the region recently, I think it was last May, in which he was promised trillions of dollars of trade and all kinds of goodies, including a plane worth $400 million or something. You know, all that should not have been done without placing any kind of conditions. How could they bring this kind of aid, this kind of economic support without demanding the end of a genocide in which the United States is an active participant? So for us to act like we can't do much about it, we can only complain and we can only say empty words, is unacceptable. And I think the people have said that. Today we have over 40 vessels, you know, in the Sumud flotilla coming to break the siege on Gaza. I mean, there are dozens of countries who are participating. We need now to make a stronger voice when it comes to how we can expel, for example, Israel, or at least suspend its membership in the United Nations. There has to be other movements in which they can be held accountable. We have a war criminal now calling the shots without any fear of being apprehended. We have dozens and perhaps even hundreds of Israeli military people roaming around the world. All these things that have to come into hot water. They have to feel the pressure. If the United States is not doing it, everybody else should be part of this. Spain has been trying this, and I think the world has to unite around this. And for the last word about the neighboring countries here, they have a lot to say, but unfortunately, many of them are not independent and sovereign enough to carry out whatever they can do. So we need to break free from this American grip that has been suffocating not only the people in this region, but also the systems that have been ruling them now for decades. People have to say in one word that we're not going to support governments that would be pressured by the United States so that our brothers and sisters in Palestine would die at the behest of a genocidal regime.
Thank you very much, Professor Sami Al-Arian.
Thank you.